Just to tell everybody that this webinar will be recorded and the recording has just started.
Well, just give me a minute. So again, welcome everybody to this new webinar organized by the International Association of Public Media Researchers. My name is Marta Rodriguez Castro. I'm a researcher at the University of Santiago de Compostela. And I am also the secretary and the representative of young scholars of the IAPMR. I am honored to chair today's webinar, the first of the series IAPMR, Partners at Work. We are very lucky to have with us today Dr. Florence Hartmann, head of the Media Intelligence Service of the European Broadcasting Union. During this webinar, as you know, Florence will offer an overview of her team's recent research activity and will illustrate the topics and priorities of the EBU for this year with some examples from their last reports. After Florence's intervention, there will be time for a discussion on further topics, exchanges, and collaborations. So please feel free to write your questions and your comments in the chat during the webinar. My colleagues Maria Michalis and Minas Lama-Korowicz from the IAPMR as well will be working with us in this Q&A session. So as Mina was saying, please note that the webinar is going to be recorded. It's being recorded and it will be available in YouTube, in our YouTube channel in the following day so that you can watch it again if you want. So now before I give the floor to Florence, let me just introduce our speaker a little bit more. As I mentioned before, Florence Hartmann is the manager of the Media Intelligence Service of the European Broadcasting Union. This being the market research unit of the EBU, the EBU-MIS aims at providing reliable data, trustworthy analysis, and relevant arguments to build the case for public service media. Florence Hartmann's own research and publications focus on media market trends, the economics of the audiovisual markets, public service media contribution to the European creative sector, various aspects of PSM funding and staffing of PSM, including gender equality and diversity issues. Before joining the EBU, she was an analyst at the European Audiovisual Observatory, and she had also worked as a research fellow within the Groupe d'Économie Mondiale at Sciences Po Paris. It is also an honor to have you, Florence, with us today and to engage in a conversation with the EBU during this next hour and a half. I won't waste any more time in the introduction, so without further ado, Florence, whenever you want, you can start.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Marta, for the very kind introduction. And thank you very, very much to the full team for the invitation to speak today and to meet with the community and the academic community. It is really a pleasure, an honor. It is, from me, really a sense of achievement, something really that we need to continue and to discuss about, that collaboration between the EBU and the academic community. So I'm really pleased, all of that to just that I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you very much. You said a lot about my profile so that everybody understands. So indeed, I have an economic background, and actually I spent a few years in the academic area, mainly when I was in my time in Sciences Po Paris. And then I have to say that I left the academic community 15 years ago when I joined the European Audiovisual Observatory in Strasbourg. I mostly really focused the research on the research being part of the European Audiovisual Observatory. And then now, almost 10 years ago, I joined from the European Audiovisual Observatory, I joined the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU. And it's true that since then, I focus my work on the work of the EBU, of the MIS. But that being said, the MIS, which was set up 10 years ago at the EBU by with a team to which I belonged, but also with Roberto Suarez Candel, who you know very well, and David Fernandez Quirada. Always there was this willingness, this idea to try to bridge the market research, the industry research being done at the EBU together with more academic research. So that was always this willingness, and Roberto and David did really well in bridging the two worlds, exchanging, participating to the RIPE conference and to other academic conferences. I was there during all these years in the background doing some other work for the MIS. So I heard about all of these exchanges and developments. I was not at the forefront, I was less involved. But now, having taken over from David and being now the manager of the unit, I'm really keen on developing these exchanges. So, but before we discussed about that, we said that I would make a presentation of the MIS, of the unit, and of the topics on which we work. So let me please share my screen. Here is it. And now full screen. So I won't insult any of you by introducing you to the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union. You all know about the Alliance of Public Broadcasters in Europe, and Europe being taken in a broad sense, continental Europe, and even going in Northern African region. So we are based in Geneva. I'm today in a nice countryside close to Geneva. It's a lovely, lovely city. It could also be nice to arrange one day some physical meetings over there, but that's not the point for now. So what do we do at the Media Intelligence Service? And the presentation for today will be really focused on the MIS. And it is important for everybody to keep in mind the fact that MIS, Media Intelligence Service, is really one unit of a broader EBU. The EBU is really a broader organization than just the MIS. So within the EBU, we are the market research unit. So what we do, we usually present our activities through three pillars. The first one being research. So we do publish some deliverables, some material. Our main focus is really to deliver this material to EBU members. We are a professional organization, so we are mainly here to serve the members. That being said, I will also insist later on the fact that we also try to serve other purposes, such as improving the transparency of the market, etc. I said I worked during 5 years at the European Audiovisual Observatory, whose objective and motto is to increase the transparency of the market. So I do strongly believe into this. But of course, being at the EBU, it is mostly for EBU members themselves. So we do produce reports, data sets, infographics, slide decks, and also we organize webinars or video recordings nowadays. And the reports, you will see some illustrations of what we do produce are, I have to say, mainly visual. It is very much data-oriented, fact-based, what we release and what we do. And the reports are very, very visual. So also because our members are professional working in the media sector, they're very busy. Even our counterparts within the research departments of the members are super busy. So we try to really present the information in a very compelling, simplified way, which I do believe from an academic point of view can be oversimplified or too straightforward, or because really sometimes it might lack the possibility to nuance or to develop really the ideas in written mode through long texts. That's not frequently what we do, but I will show you various examples of what we do. And sometimes we do still go in more qualitative developments and more text-based, but the majority is really fact-based. Aside from the research or complementary to the research, we also answer requests. And that I won't develop too far because this service, the ad hoc, the customized, tailored research is really mostly reserved for the members. And the third part of what we do is really the networking activities. So here, the idea is really to get in touch with external stakeholders. I already mentioned a few times, for instance, the European Audiovisual Observatory. So the EBU is a member of the advisory committee of the observatory, and at MIS, we do represent the EBU at this advisory committee meeting. We also are in touch with networks of regulators, such as the EPRA, a bit less frequently with the ERGA, and we try also, of course, to be in touch with researchers, with academics. So that's also a part of what we do and what we like doing, of course. A very important point I would like to explain is how to access MIS research. So part of what we do is restricted to members only. And this is for two reasons that I said that I was really keen on trying to get information available to the public or to the market or to researchers or students. But the problem comes from two sides. First of all, some part of the information that we use in our reports or that we do collect is really collected under a confidentiality agreement from EBU members, from the public broadcasters. So to say it very quickly and not to go into the details, every year with the colleagues from the MIS unit, we do reach out to all the public broadcasters being members of the EBU with a very, very big survey, which is called the Media Intelligence Survey. It is broken down in several sections, each of the sections being big Excel documents with plenty of Excel spreadsheets. And they do share data, information about their strategies, about their programming, about their financials, about their personnel, about their content, etc. But of course, under confidentiality agreements. So information might be quite sensitive. We do exchange with the members, and when we know that the information is not sensitive or is widely public, we do try to put them in publicly available documents, but it is not always the case. And that's one part of the restriction. The other reason why not all MIS research is publicly available are copyright reasons, because we do buy some data to third-party data providers, to private companies operating on the market, and the data then acquired is protected by copyright, and we can't, of course, put them publicly on the internet. It would destroy their business model. So they're having a look, of course, and it's normal, on what we do with the data we acquire. So for these reasons, not all documents are publicly available. That being said, we always try to release as much information as possible. So usually, it's not always the case, but what we try to do is when we release a report, there will be the full version, which is the members-only version, and then we try to create a public version, which of course will be lighter because some parts might be deleted because they're reserved for the members, but at least a part of the information will be publicly available and accessible on the website. And then we also do release some infographics and some other material publicly. I will go very, very quickly, but just a few material, concrete information, and then I will enter into the content. So for you to know, to access the information which is publicly available, which I described, you still need to have an EBU account. You need to log in. So this is a screenshot of the EBU homepage, ebu.ch, with the ESC latest news, of course. So from this page, you can click on the login section, and there you can create a login. Because your email addresses are not email addresses from a public broadcaster, you won't have access to all the documents, but at least you will have access to already a good range of documents. Then how to find MIS research very quickly. From the menu, you have the list of services from the EBU, and here you can find media intelligence. It's here. Or option 2, if you go in the resources of the EBU website, and I invite you all to use this resources page, you have several options, and you can see that one section is called research. Basically, everything which is under research on the website of the EBU are MIS publications. Then I invite you also to check with the other sections, because there you will find reports and analysis being done by other departments, sometimes more into the content or more into the legal aspects. Legal and policy aspects would be under guides, for instance. So don't hesitate to navigate. But it's interesting to know that under research, you will find all MIS reports, and all MIS reports will be under research. And then when you click on research, you can see the list of reports. I will make you a demo. It's really simple to use, and you have, as you can see, all the documents is written as members or public. So you see, you can find some reports will be restricted, purely restricted. Some will have public information. And then you can filter by access and of course by topics, etc. It's a normal. Last thing, concrete thing I wanted to let you know about is in order to get updated about what we do release approximately 3 reports per month, approximately 2 to 3 reports per month. So we do have weekly alerts when a report is out. And 1 time per month, we have a monthly newsletter recapping everything which was released in the previous month. So to find the MIS newsletter from the EBU website, you go to the very bottom of the page. At the very bottom, you scroll down and you have follow the EBU newsletters, and you will find a list of newsletters. Others might be very interesting also. Some others are accessible to the public. Not all of them are restricted to EBU members. The MIS newsletter is not restricted to members, so you can subscribe, and you can find it here, Media Intelligence Update, and you can subscribe. That's it. It was a lot of practical information, promo time, marketing, if you may, but because we're talking about exchanges and being informed about each other's works and publications, I thought it was a good opportunity to remind about all the possibilities to access what we do. Now let's go to come to what is of mostly relevant and most important, which is really the content and the topics. So what do we work on at the MIS, and how do we do the research? And hopefully, how can we help you in your researches? And then we will discuss about how we can collaborate. The key topics, I grouped them on this slide, and then I will go to each of them. So I grouped them under 8 items. So media markets, performance and audiences, impact, funding, values and diversity, content, online, and audio. So there are many ways of classifying the research. It's not perfect and it might evolve, of course, but at least it provides a key and a typology to be able to start a dialogue around all these themes that we are working on. So now I will go into the details of all of these topics, showing you a bit, explaining you that the reports that we do publish. I won't be able to show you everything because that would need like 10 hours webinar, but giving you really like small insights and small overviews, short overviews into the types of research that we do. So the first topic, for instance, is media markets. So on the left side, I've written some titles of reports that we are going to release in 2022 related to the topic of media markets. So for instance, we just had the competitive environment one, which was released two weeks ago, I do believe, and which came with a public version because that report was mostly based on publicly available information, because in this report, we do compare the funding of public service media with the financial metrics from the biggest commercial players on the sector, and we try to analyze a bit how the market shifts. So indeed, it is a massive topic of interest for us at MIS and for EBU members, the shifts and the changes in the competitive environment. We're speaking here about how the giants are shaping the competition. And for instance, we have a massive interest into what happens and the disruption happening at the moment on the production sector in Europe with the content giants, including now the US studios, which were for long mostly involved in the European markets quite indirectly through ownership of subsidiaries or brands, but really less involved in the direct production of European content. So now we see a shift, and we are very interested into understanding what this means. So in terms of competitive equilibrium, of course, what it means also in terms of policy, but also what it means very concretely in terms of IP, for instance, in the traditional relation between the producers and the broadcasters. So the disruptions over the value chain at stake. We're really looking at this. Other topics linked to the changes in the media market, for instance, we're interested at the moment, video games, what is happening with the video games sector. We can also speak about that later when we talk about young audiences, etc. But we're not only looking at what happens in terms of consumption trends and where the young people are and how do they spend their time and how do they entertain, but also what happens really from a competitive point of view, from a market structure point of view, with all the acquisitions of the video game studios and the consolidations really at stake. So that is, and this leads us to the topic of the mergers, of competition law, the vertical integrations, and the walled gardens, etc. So that we really have been asked to prioritize these questions, as you see also in the names of the reports. We are currently commissioning a report to some private consultants about scenarios for PSM in 2032. So it is also something we're exploring, also looking at the future trends and what will happen on the media sector in the next 10 years to try to anticipate a bit better. A last word on the competitive aspect and the purely market structure aspects is also the one related to partnerships. So not only the pure competition, but also, and sometimes in reaction to the competitive pressure, where can PSM position themselves in terms of alliances, collaborations, partnerships with private sector, with commercial media groups? This is something we've tried to map for a long time, and of course it keeps changing. And PSM themselves keep reassessing their strategies. It is really a trial and fail sometime or successes in other times strategy. But we are also willing, I would say that on the partnership collaboration aspects, we've been working in the past and also with academic, because we had commissioned an academic research, but perhaps 3-4 years ago on this topic. And this is something we would like to explore further. So for the media markets, I can show you some examples of how we do cover or some glimpse really of what we do offer in the public version of the reports, because it's not just about understanding what we are doing, but it is also telling you what type of resources are available for you and for your researches and for your students also. So for instance, in the competitive environment reports I mentioned, we do look at really the sizes of the market. So there are some slides about the size of the European market, and we do take some data from the European Audiovisual Observatory about how the global audiovisual market is now looking, and the size of the US groups, for instance. And there are very interesting analysis about the fact that actually the US interests are getting bigger within the European markets. So Europe is actually declining. The size of Europe in the global market is declining, and the size of European controlled groups within the European audiovisual market is also declining, to the benefit mostly for the moment of US group, also Chinese groups, and we're having a look at some other groups, but for the moment it is really the US, thanks to SVOD and all these developments. Very quickly, we are trying to compare public service media with other types of competitors, such as the European commercial media, telecom operators, the global tech giants, the global content giants. The global content giants would be more the US studios, for instance. And we can see here that we put them on a chart in regards to their degree of diversification and degree of globalization. So of course, the public broadcasters are not that globalized. They operate only in Europe, and are not very much diversified outside the audiovisual sector compared with the other players. So with enormous revenues, and of course only a tiny part of their revenues are derived from European markets and from audiovisual markets, but still it is enough to disrupt these markets. I won't say more about this market side and come to a second topic. And of course, can also take questions if there's any questions for now. Otherwise, I can continue. So with performance and audience, so here I will be shorter. Audience reports is part of the things that we are asked to do at the EBU. So for instance, typically to track the audience of EBU events, such as the Eurovision Song Contest, which you might all have watched over the weekend. And but also to track more globally the market shares, the reach of European broadcasters, of PSM broadcasters, and the market shares, and also the time spent watching TV or listening to radio. We're following, of course, all the consumption patterns. We are here again quite devoted to try to always release some public versions of these reports. So of course, in the members versions of the report, we do have all the market shares for the individual groups, for the individual EBU members, and we can't release them publicly because we acquire this data to Glance, which was formerly called Eurodata TV Worldwide. And we are not allowed to release the figures publicly. However, we do release some aggregates, figures, and trends. So these are all publicly available. So we do release some trends, charts, and figures about television reach overall, like how much do people consume still TV, and the same with radio, and whether goes to viewing on the same day, etc., the new consumption patterns. But we also do release some figures about market shares of public service media, and also on all audience, and also, as you can see here on the right side of the slide, with some focus on young audiences, on youth. And we can see, of course, that the market share is lower. So this leads us to what was written here on below the topics, and on the various topics linked with PSM performance and audience. Of course, we're also very keen on trying to understand, follow what young audiences are doing. That's a massive interest from public broadcasters, and I have to say from all broadcasters actually. And there are also, so we are trying to do some research and understand how to reach them. And it leads to also, I'm linking it here to another topic, not totally directly related to young audiences, but of high interest, and also of high interest for public broadcasters, which is the difficult, what we call the difficult to reach audiences. And this is a very important topic specifically for public broadcasters in the light of the role that public broadcasters have and have to continue to maintain really on the European media markets, which is to really to be universal and try to reach everybody, and to play a democratic role in reaching all audiences. And this difficult to reach audiences is a very interesting topic actually, because it bridges really very well with so not only performance and market, but really also on PSM values, what it means really being a PSM, and on more widely what happens in European societies with the polarization and some audiences being less and less willing to trust and to be touched or addressed by some media. So really this also is a massive and major topic of interest for us. I will now jump to the third topic, which is not a small one. It is the contribution to society, the impact of PSM, the public value of public broadcaster. It is, of course, core. It is central for public service media because, as we said, we are interested into market development and the competitive issues, etc. But we don't forget that we're not a player like the other players, like the other ones, similar than the other ones, and then the commercial players on the markets. We are here because of the sets of PSM values, and because PSM also, we do strongly believe, deliver very specific contributions and impact on society. So we do have also a range of publications, and you might know about the numerous contribution to society reports, which were created in the past by Roberto, by David, by Tanya, the team, which was really very active on this topic. And of course, contribution to society was a topic for the latest RIPE conference. So at the MIS, we are continuing to develop the research on that area. So we're exploring on the contribution to democracy with a report which we do release every 2 years on democracy and PSM. And this one comes with a public version, which actually is almost like the full report. And we are in 2022 now developing a new series of reports, assessing and trying to understand how PSM report on their economic impact and social impact. So we just released the PSM economic impact. And in this report, what we tried to do was to really look at the various reports being published or commissioned by public broadcasters on their economic impact. And we looked at all the arguments being used in these reports and putting them, trying to create a typology actually of narratives, of arguments, so that to help really the community using these different narratives. And we will try to, or we plan actually, so we will release another report, so on the social impact of PSM content and also of PSM of air activities in the autumn. So it is also, if you are interested in this topic, you know, it is coming, we will work on that in a few months. So don't hesitate to reach out or to ask questions, or that would be very interesting. So very quickly, again, to show you a bit how this look, for instance, here, I took an extract from the democracy report. So in that report, what we try to do, the methodological approach, if I may, I won't detail all the methodologies of all the reports, but when it's a bit different, this one is very much based on correlations. So we use some metrics PSM related, like the funding of PSM or the market shares of PSM. And we do put them together with more societal, well-being, democratic indicators. And then we try to see if there is a correlation, and a meaningful, of course, statistically meaningful correlation. And we run every 2 years, we do a series of tests. And this allows us to conclude or to try to have some statements about still the role and the correlation, so not causation. We're very careful with that. We're totally aware of the limitations of the analysis, but at least of the statistical correlations between some various indicators, in order to really try to reflect and objectivize a bit some arguments around the democratic role of public broadcasters. This one is very different. It comes from the economic impact of PSM. And here again, we try to look at the various existing reports, and of course, try to summarize a bit. The idea was not to show who would have, because the methodologies behind these reports are different. So the idea would not be to say, well, in this country, €1 put in the public broadcaster allows to create 2.5 euros in the economy, but in this other market, it is €3 being created. So, no, but overall, it is interesting to see that all the reports go really in the same direction, in some very coherent economic role. And what's more interesting is also to develop the other analysis, because that's really a first primary, if I may say, basic economic argument, the multiplier effect, which is very interesting. And there were, I remember, some very interesting conversation during the RIPE conference about the fact that public broadcasters were acknowledging the limitations of this analysis, but still saying that political stakeholders usually were still very interested and must be convinced by these arguments. So what we try to do is to explain the multipliers effects and how it's been used by public broadcasters, but also to explain some other arguments which are very interesting about the role of PSM in the production sector. Like, for instance, some PSM managed to demonstrate that for a producer, for an independent producer, if you have the PSM entering on the financial table and accepting to co-produce a piece of content, actually that will activate the others, the other funds, the other sources of funding, public or private, to also sit at the table. So PSM acting really as catalysts here for the production sector, the same in the music industry or in the radio sector. So we have tried to put some, try to really take as many narratives as possible to go a bit further and elaborate a bit more than just the multiplier effect. Now I come to the topic of funding, which is also a very interesting one, and I've seen the research roundup on the IAPMR website recently. That was very useful. And again, that one I would like to stress the efforts at MIS that we do in terms of transparency. We don't put all the data and everything public, but since the MIS was created and launched a few years ago, we did really our best to try to release every year a public version of the funding of PSM and of the license fee report, putting really public the amounts of the fees and the funding of PSM in some countries, and some aggregates or weighted calculations. So we are trying to be as much transparent as possible, in full respect with the confidential agreement we have with the members. So here, really in terms of funding, we do collect all the data, and I do believe that we are the unique and the main source of PSM funding data in Europe. What we are very interested at the moment is, of course, to follow the reforms in the funding models and in the funding schemes, and what these reforms might mean in terms of safeguards, in terms of sustainability of the funding models. So we are really working, for instance, on the macro indicators in some countries. The level, the amount of funding of public broadcasters is linked to a macro indicator. There are several cases with different indicators in Europe, and we're really looking at them, and we would really welcome some also exchanges on opinions about what are the most effective indicators, or, this is always very interesting to discuss. And of course, what type of safeguards can be put in place to preserve and to guarantee the sustainability of the public broadcaster, because of course the EBU has long been and is always trying to protect the license fee model, which we think is a good funding model for public broadcasters. But that being said, we are also fully aware that in some countries you might have a license fee, and still the amount of the license fee can be changed from one year to another rather drastically or easily. And that is not a guarantee of stable funding over the years. And whereas in some other countries, the funding is mostly derived from state budget, but when it comes with some guarantees with a model where actually the funding of the public broadcaster is calculated seriously, independently, based on the financial needs of the broadcaster to fulfill its remit, and the funding is guaranteed over a midterm, a few years period of time. Actually, it works. So we try to also get into the subtleties of the mechanism a bit further than just opposing state budget and license fee, which of course remains a very valid way of looking at the reality, but we're even trying to go further. And just a couple of words on the fact that we're also, of course, looking at commercial sources of revenues, because PSM funding is not increasing a lot. It is very stable, constraints, or even there are cuts, as you know, all in many countries. So PSM are trying to diversify their funding. So we're looking, of course, at advertising, which always has been a supplementary source of revenue. And we're keen on understanding and monitoring what happens now with addressable advertising, etc. But what we are mostly focusing on at the moment is the diversification of commercial income, the other ways through which PSM could try to supplement their public funding. We're not trying that they should become major or massive or even very important sources of revenue for PSM. We strongly believe and plead for funding of PSM to remain massively public. But for the 10, 15, 17% of other revenues, we are really interested into the diversification through content sales, IP, etc., the distribution. So here, of course, it leads to strategical questions around what to do with the platforms, because there is competition involved, but of course there are also potentials for deriving revenues when selling the content to platforms. So we are trying to understand the strategies and understand what the best calculations could be for PSM. Very quickly, then again, I will illustrate. So I was saying we're not trying to simplify too much the funding models, but here on this map, they are simplified with license fee and household charges being in light blue, fund outside state budget, which we do distinguish from other funding models, which are the Finnish and Swedish models, and public funds, so state budgets being in dark blue, and where we are trying to really fine-tune the analysis is to try to distinguish within these public funds countries, which one have managed to create again some proper safeguards, and which one really the PSM remains dependent on the yearly transfer from the state budget, which is not what we do recommend. Again, just to illustrate the fact that we do put some data really for the public, publicly available. We do release the numbers regarding the license fee in the various markets, with also trying to compare them in terms of purchasing power, parity, etc. So all of that you can find in the public versions of the reports. Another topic now, which is again very important, a very broad topic, so I'm speaking about plenty of things at the same time, but it is values and diversity. I won't go into all the PSM values. You all know about the 6 values defined by the EBU for PSM, but I will just insist on the fact that we put some emphasis. We've been putting some emphasis since, I would say, 4 years ago, on really diversity. Diversity and inclusion is a massive topic for the EBU. The EBU is really encouraging public broadcasters to embrace diversity and inclusion topics. And we are accompanying this strategical move by releasing many reports. So we are releasing reports on gender equality and PSM, trying to show what is happening both on the content side and in staff. And then we have even some wider reports on diversity. Diversity meaning then in these reports, ethnicity, sexual orientations, and gender being embraced in a wider sense than just women and men, and not accessibility, but disabilities. Sorry, I was missing. So disability. So these 3 dimensions are being thoroughly studied in 2 reports, which we actually released very recently, and they were promoted in NRED this morning, I do believe. So one report again on the strategy and staff of PSM, and one report on the on-screen, on-air diversity in content. And this is the cover you have here. In that report, there are developments about what happens overall in the various countries on the market. So not only what PSM are doing, but it is a wider research report. We do also publish some reports about access services, which is why I got confused with disability, but disability in the diversity report is really about representation of people with disabilities. And in the PSM access services, we monitor what PSM are doing in terms of accessibility services. Here in the values and diversity, I also put this massive question of trust with the work that we do every year regarding trust in media, and we are putting more and more emphasis in trust in PSM and what happens here, trust, distrust. And we look at the evolutions and the trust gap widening between legacy media and online media. We look also at what's happening with trust in PSM in times of crisis. We had some data and analysis linked with what happened in the COVID time when the crisis started, and we are trying to renew a bit the analysis and understand what happens. We might see if we can have some developments also on the Russian-Ukraine war and what it means in terms of trust in PSM. And we do also try to look at who trusts PSM more and who distrusts PSM more. So it is also a pillar of research at the MIS that we are really keen on continuing to develop. It is one of our most downloaded reports really every year. And overall, I mentioned the PSM values, the universality, diversity, etc. The 6 values, innovations. Some of them we explore a bit less. Some of them we did we made major efforts, such as with diversity. I would say that in the forthcoming months or years, one of the forthcoming point of interest for us will be the value of the pillar excellence, with really the content, the uniqueness, the distinctiveness of PSM content. I do feel that it is an area we comment a bit, but we don't research enough. So this is something we would like to research more. And also in the 6 EBU values comes the accountability. And I do feel that on transparency, and it's a word I pronounced a few times, we have also more to do. We did release a piece of work, which was a self-monitoring tool to assess the transparency of PSM, but that was almost, I would say, 7-8 years ago. So we need to continue the work and move it forward. So very quickly, I won't enter into the details, but this is to show you some extracts of the very recent, again, released today report on diversity. For instance, we have statistics about the representation of ethnic minorities in the various countries. Of course, the typologies and definitions vary from one market to another, but it is interesting to read all of these developments, and always it is very much, we try to find the data and to always be very fact-based in the reports. So there are really stats about the representation of ethnic minorities, of people with disabilities, of LGBTQIA+ community in people in the European media, but we also look in the report at qualitative analysis and stereotypes, for instance, and really how these actors or how these roles are being depicted really on screen or on air. So all of that you can find, and there is really a public version, but this report is very, very interesting. The work of gathering all the existing research from Europe and even more than Europe. I will now go to the next item, which is PSM content, and I will be very quick because that's really impossible to summarize going really to the content itself, but to help you understand where we come from and what we do at the MIS. PSM content, actually, we looked less at really the content. We don't do content analysis at all at the MIS. And we've been less looking at the programs themselves and the pieces of content because it is too much. We have over 100 members in 56 markets, so we can't really go into the full content analysis. But still, that being said, we've been now trying to release some new researches and reports focusing on some genre. That's the approach that we took, was to speak about some genre. And that is also linked, not only, but also linked to the fact to some advocacy and policy related debates. Because for instance, and thinking now of PSM and sports, and I can show you, for instance, this slide, which was in the recent PSM and sports report. There are some attempts from commercial operators or to limit the remit of public broadcasters, noticeably in terms of genre. So there are some debates, and it also goes with some polarization of the society, or the increase in some populist views sometimes. There might be, so it's not in all the countries, but in some countries there are increasing pressure to decrease a bit the volume of content, or to even discourage PSM to broadcast certain genres. So for instance, sports or entertainment, and there might be some others. So we are trying to really address these questions, understand where it comes, and why we, of course, think it is absolutely not valid and would not be a good thing, not only for PSM, but also for European citizens and for other players on the market, on the audiovisual markets, and even other stakeholders. So for instance, in the PSM and sports report, we try to demonstrate that, of course, sport is really a nice the important genre for public broadcasters, but the other way around is mostly important, is that PSM sports coverage is important for sport and for the society in terms of social cohesion, in terms of participation, in terms also for the federation themselves to promote the sports. And also because PSM, with their values, they can promote smaller sports, less popular sports. They did a lot to promote women in sports, for instance. So all of that together really makes the case for PSM to continue to broadcast sports. And this is something looking at the various genres with their specificities, something we're trying to do. For instance, here there is a slide on news, and we are here also, of course, I spoke already about trust. We are looking at all of these issues. We are looking at the fact that PSM are supporting journalistic work. PSM are supporting local news, for instance. And there are very interesting cases of partnerships in local news. It is also something we look at very carefully, and we're very interested into. And we look at the transformation also of the newsrooms, and we follow these developments closely in order to explain to the members how to continue to evolve and remain relevant. So, as I said, the content, it's not qualitative analysis of the pieces of content, but it is really about the relevance of these contents, what PSM can bring to the sectors, to the economic sectors, to the stakeholders, and why it is fulfilling its role and its missions and its remit with this genre. Next is a massive one. Again, PSM online, all the digital transformation related topics. We do follow these items really closely. I will try to be a bit quicker because I'm speaking too long now. So I will go very quickly. And also for this item, I have to say, and I'm a bit sorry for that, but we have less publicly available content because we acquire many data from external sources when it relates to online. And there we're not allowed to really reproduce. So we try to, and we are aware of the fact that we don't release a lot of public data on everything which relates to online and digital, but we are aware of that, and we will try to find solutions, and it's something we look at really. So really on the left side are examples of reports that we do release, and I will show you, for instance, the fact that we are following the activities of the members online, their online brands, their apps, etc. For instance, in order to reach young people, because I mentioned universality, it is a priority, of course, to reach to young audiences and young people. So we are really searching this. We do always try to link with, and we have to, because for the members, they can go online and develop their online presence when they are allowed to do so. So it is always linked with the development of the remit and of the missions of public broadcasters. And we do strongly advocate for PSM to be allowed to move online and to develop their online brands and presence. And then we try to look at what it means in terms of organizational structure, in terms of organograms, for instance, and organization of the production and of the distribution for the public broadcasters. That's something The EBU is really active. MIS is not at the forefront in that area. It is really the digital transformation initiative led by some colleagues, but we are trying to support by monitoring really what is happening and what the members are doing. So we do follow the market, we do follow the consumption, we do follow PSM strategies. Here I put a chart on the presence of public broadcasters on social media and on which platforms are they investing more, increasing their efforts, which ones are they considering strategic or not. We are monitoring and doing some analysis on that area. And very quickly, I think it's the last topic, is audio. So again, we have a range of specific reports, because actually audio is present in all of everything, the work that I developed and I explained. Always we try to have an audio dimension, but still some public broadcasters are purely radio and audio. And also in terms of communities of colleagues, it is still very much organized with audio and radio communities. And of course, the topics and the challenges and the data and are specific to the audio environment. So we are also releasing some research, and we're really keen on reading more, because it's sometimes an area which is less developed in terms of research, but which is also very important. And at the moment, we see really massive and rapid development on the audio market, with, of course, the explosion of podcasts. And what does it mean with the new players really arriving on this segment, which has long been rather protected from international competition? So what does it mean for radio broadcasters, for instance? So we're looking at all of that. And another topic of specific interest, for instance, for us is audio in cars. What is happening? There is also some tech or innovation dimension into this, but also in terms of competition, in terms of strategy for the members, in terms of consumption. What do people listen in cars, and do they still listen? And we do believe that yes, there's still a need for live radio in cars, and then how to reach with the new connected cars, how to reach the people. Here is an example again from an audio related report where we demonstrated, and we took from some national researches on the diversity of the artists and of the playlist and of the titles being played on public radios and public streams compared with commercial radio. That was very interesting research, which was released January or February, I do believe. With very nice conclusions. So, of course, out of that, I'm not alone to release this report. We are a team of 7, and you can see the faces of my very, very nice colleagues, all of them working to create all these reports. As I said, 2 to 3 reports per month, so it goes very quickly. And now I would like to stop, sorry for being a bit long, speaking about what we do and the MIS reports, the data that we do manipulate, and really speak about the collaboration, because here we see a team, but also you are working in teams, you are a community, and now it would be really nice to exchange about how we can collaborate and promote each other's work, perhaps, or question each other's works.
Thank you very much, Florence, for your presentation. Thank you also for showing us the faces of all the team working with you at the EBU, at the Media Intelligence Service. We have quite a lot of questions. I can present some of them if you want. The first one is kind of a practical question. Servet Janatma, I was wondering if it would be possible to share the presentation, the slides with the participants. So if you, yes. Okay, that's great. You can send it to me and I can forward it to everybody who's here. That's great. So moving to content related topics. Maria Constantino was asking, I think it was in relation to audience. Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, how worrying the downward trend is for public service media organizations.
Yes, with the the audience, and that was surely the slide that I showed with the TV market shares. So of course this is worrying, and actually, so the market share is going slightly down. In 2020, it was going even good results with the COVID crisis. But actually, what public broadcasters are mostly worried about is not even the market share within the linear TV measurement, but it is the wider environment. It is the fact that actually linear TV as such is getting a smaller and a reduced market share within the whole consumption of video. So if you look at only, because in the end, if you look at only the TV market shares results, the linear TV market shares results, even if the measurements now take into account the catch up really after a few hours or after a few days, here actually the trend is on the whole population, not too bad. It's quite stable in many countries. But what happens is that the overall consumption of TV, of linear TV, is going down because, of course, now there are new modalities, new ways of consuming videos. And this is why public broadcasters should be entitled to really move online and really deploy their activities and be present online through the apps, etc., and not be too limited, for instance, with limitation of the content to purely catch up. That we do believe that's an old way of looking really at the way people consume TV and media nowadays. And then, of course, there is a question of the young audiences, which we saw here, like the curves are following similar trends, but really at a lower level. So here the question is all the more acute, how to reach them. It is again being present online, being also present on social media, being where they are. So and public broadcasters, of course, it is on a strategical point of view, on the budgetary point of view, it is not an easy equation because public broadcaster can't really abandon linear services. It is not at stake because they need to serve all audiences. So public broadcasters have to stay present linear, but they have also to be present online in order to reach everybody. So that role of universality is more and more difficult to fulfill because the public is really not anymore in the same place. And it is all the more difficult since public broadcasters are not always entitled to deploy their strategy and not given the financial resources to do so.
Thank you, Florence. There was a new question now by Michael Klomsas about audiences. I think we can take it now before we move on to different topics. And Michael said that on young audiences becoming elusive, research into audience demographic is typically static. Is there any research into what happens to those young audiences when they are not young anymore? Because Michael says that it wouldn't be too surprising if they started consuming more news and current affairs as they get older.
Yes, that's a very good question, and that's a typical question for audience researchers within the broadcasters, and it's a question that they've been looking at. It's the cohort effect. And the fact that indeed, when you're young, there's a certain age where you consume less media, where you consume less TV, and then after a certain age, you settle, you have your children, you stay more frequently at home, and you go back to more traditional ways of consuming media. That was still the case. The cohort effect was getting a bit less and less obvious, but was still happening, I would say, a few years ago. Now it is really being put at stake, whether the shift and for who we call the Gen Z, that is really being questioned. It is, of course, a bit too early to say what will happen with them. So the Gen Z are the 12 to 20, I do think, or people. now. So it is too early we can't read into the future, but it is strongly questioned that now we see the consumption patterns changing also. And also we saw with SVOD, for instance, a few years ago. SVOD was mostly for younger generation and young people, and now it is not at all the case. We've all seen all the data and the article about Netflix is even worried about the average age of their viewers, and which is why they're also going and acquiring some video game studios, etc., to try to acquire some video games brands and IPs to get the young back. Yeah, there are some analysis saying that SVOD is no longer at all something for young people. So the cohort effect might be less and less important.
Thank you, Florence, for your answer for this very interesting and highly contested topic. If we go on with the Q&A, Eleonora Mazzoli was wondering, is it possible to have more details on the types of metrics and indicators that you use for measuring societal impact, in reference to the reports on societal impact of the EBU, as well as the report that you publish about the relation between democracy and public service media? Any insights on this societal impact topic?
Yes, so for the societal impact, it's a bit too early. So because we will work on it in the second part of the year, so I don't have the secret recipe now. What is for sure is that it will not be the EBU creating a metric or an indicator to be followed by, because we don't have this secret recipe, and we do believe that anyway. The context, the landscapes very much vary from one market to another. But the idea, if we build something a bit similar to what we just did with economic impact, is rather to start from what exists and what has been studied and released by public broadcasters, or also by other stakeholders, because it is also very good to always get inspiration about what type of metrics they've found in order to demonstrate the impact of some pieces of news, of some off-air program, initiative, etc. For instance, now I'm thinking, I don't know, about some health-related initiatives. Where we could, I'm sure in the report we would have some examples COVID-related, that there is no doubt. I'm now thinking at loud, for instance, in order to give an idea of the type of cases and things we will illustrate. There are great cases, and they were at the starting point of this thinking from Australia. ABC Australia is really at the forefront of measuring impact in general. They're really advanced. I recommend really that they have plenty of very good publications. And they do have a unit actually in charge of measuring the impact. They do have some people measuring impact within the public broadcaster. And for instance, they showed us some examples of some initiatives that they had. Was, for instance, a social initiative was they asked people in Australia to bring to a local musical school their old musical instruments, which were, like they said, people they have at home old violins or flutes or whatever that no longer use them, bring them back to school, not to musical school, but to schools. And thanks to that, and thanks to all the calls and the websites being created by the public broadcasters and the advertisement and the programs, special programs that they had on that topic, the schools in Australia were able to set up small orchestras, etc. They had some activities. And then they could measure the number of instruments, the number of hours of music courses being taught to little Australian kids, etc. And they had a set of impact metrics with the local communities in order to really track the impact of their initiative. They also had some similar examples with sustainability, where they encouraged people to drop their car and use their bikes, and then they measured the number of kilometers, etc., etc. So it is a bit different metrics than for the economic impact. And it requires to be a bit innovative and to really invent. But we do believe that we won't reinvent all of them, but we can take really from the plenty of great initiatives and examples and putting them together, inspire and give a sort of toolkit for public broadcasters to try to launch their own initiative and measure the impact, report the impact back.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you also for these examples you were bringing up. I'd like now to have Maria Michalis take over the Q&A. She is the co-president of the IAPMR, so she will be taking the questions now.
Thank you. Thanks, Marta. And thank you, Florence, from me as well. I am aware that time is getting tight, and I would like us, if possible, to have some time to think about the synergies. So how the EBU and academia can help each other. So whilst I'm going through the next questions, keep this in mind. So there are two interventions around PSM and how they can use data, artificial intelligence to personalize services, perhaps as part of the broader theme of value, societal value. I don't know if MIS does any related work.
So it is not MIS directly working on this, but the EBU is very active in promoting this topic and public service algorithm and all the work in that framework. But that this is really, it relates more to our colleagues from the technology and innovation, because we have great engineers really working at the EBU and working on a lot on standardization. That's a massive part of EBU's work is to develop some technical standards, and for years, and they're doing very well, but they're also very innovative and develop plenty of initiatives. And yes, they're very, very active in that framework. But time is lacking, but I would recommend also for everybody to also look at the European Perspective website and project. It is really a great project bringing together the news from, I think, 12 public broadcasters with automatic translation tools and artificial intelligence, and then translating the pieces of news from one language to another. And there are really plenty of very interesting innovations and developments in that area, yes.
Thank you. Then perhaps you know there was a recent experiment by the BBC, the deprivation study, and it relates to public value. So I think, how long was it? Was it like 9 or 10 days, I think? Some households had no access to BBC services. So the idea was to see how much they missed BBC services, which then translates into the value of PSP. Are you aware of similar experiments, studies in other EBU countries?
Not yet, but it is a very interesting. Research, and it is a very interesting question. To tell you the truth, I'm attending next week a conference bringing together the heads of audience research from the various members. We have an annual conference where the various research departments from the members present also their research, and this, of course, will be is part of the agenda and will be discussed. So you can see that the concept might be then taken by some other broadcasters. You know, it might be tested elsewhere.
By the way, this is the second time this has been done. There was another such study, again in relation to the BBC, quite some time ago. So I think it's interesting to keep it in mind. Then another question that was from me, actually, when you listed PSM content, you had 4 categories: news, sports, fiction, and kids. Education was missing.
Absolutely. That was, yes, Yes, and that's a misunderstanding perhaps, because on the bullet points I listed mostly topics for our concrete topics for our reports for 2022 agenda, and these are the ones we're working on. Other topics are missing. Education is a very important one, and we've seen really with with the COVID crisis how crucial it really became, and PSM. Most of them maintained really a high level of engagement on educative content. And it is certainly something we should investigate more, because we are tracking a bit, we're collecting some statistics and data, but we don't have a report on educative content, educational content. And that's something I would very much welcome. Another topic for a potential report is also PSM and entertainment, which is for another set of reasons, totally different, but also because it is at stake and being questioned in several countries in terms of remit and of constraining the remit. So, of course, so the topics being listed are not the genre most important or the only genre, but it was really just from an MIS perspective, what we looked at recently, at what we are about to study really in our research. But I do fully agree, educational content is crucial, and we should have something on that more regular.
Okay, thank you. Then a question from Christina, it's about policy positions of the EBU. She's asking, were recommendations put forward so far on the future of must carry rules versus platform regulation?
Oh, that I wouldn't answer that question. I'm really sorry for that, because I'm trying to follow the work of the colleagues from Brussels office and the legal department, but there are many files at the moment. It is really busy period, but busy years really in Brussels. And I have to confess there, I don't want to say a mistake or to...
If I just might add,
Yeah.
Thank you, Florence. I tried to look up your position in terms of, you have published a lot of submitted public opinion, public consultation responses in the wake of the DSA and also previously, but I could not find any kind of reference to this issue, which I might have considered important. So I was kind of surprised that maybe it was my mistake not finding the right answers, the right submissions by EBU, but I think it would be very important to know what is your position about this.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Maria.
If you agree, Christina, and I understand how frustrating it can be to ask a question, not to get an immediate answer, but I don't like to speak of something I'm not too sure about.
Fully understand. Thank you.
I will have a look. I will take a look, and I can ask if I can't find it myself. I will ask to my legal colleagues, and I've noted your name, so I can go back to you.
It's a really interesting question. Thank you, Christine. I think many of us would be interested in the answer if you can find more about it. I think that's about it, unless if anyone thinks that I have forgotten a question, please speak up. I think. Go ahead.
No, Maria, I was just about to rebound on then the question of the collaboration and the exchanges, perhaps quickly before, because we're reaching the end of the time. But for me, I try to think about some various options, and of course, everything is always on the table. But we can try to do more and to continue explore how to really promote also each other's work. And as I said, we do have a newsletter. We do have a monthly newsletter. We already promoted the IAPMR website, but we can regularly remind about registering to the newsletter, or promote some what I saw with the roundup, for instance. Things like that could be promoted really by the MIS. And of course, there is also the question of the access to MIS publication. As I said, we can't grant a specific academic access, but still we try to do our best, and you can always reach me to ask for something specific, or, you know, with a specific purpose, or, you know, I'm always reachable, so don't hesitate. I had some issues recently with emails going in my spam mailbox, so I'm warning you in advance, but now I'm trying to look at it regularly. And but then, of course, that there are some wider questions beyond just promoting or ad hoc exchanges of information, which is really collaboration. And this is absolutely, this is I would say not a white page, because plenty of initiatives and collaborations have been done in the past years with MIS commissioning some reports to professors and to the academic people from the academic community. So it is certainly something which can happen, which is possible. Also inviting people to webinars. And last point I wanted to mention was also the fact that at MIS we have a position of visiting researcher. So more for a junior or a PhD student, for instance, typically, but it's often a 12-month position. So which we have. Sometimes the person doing one year is being renewed, and the position is not advertised then during 2 years or something like that. But it is regularly there are regular calls for this position, and it is really a nice opportunity also for a more junior member of the academic community to join the MIS and to see really the EBU from the inside, interact with the members, see really the industry side, and then go back to the academia. It can be very beneficial. Really, we had some very, very positive collaborations in the past. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Florence. Mina, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hello everybody. I have a broader question to Florence. What do you think about theoretical work? Can that inform you, and how? I'm specifically maybe here thinking about also the future scenarios that you're now producing, and how could we help in that part of academic work?
No, I do believe theories and concepts and ideas are useful, and are useful to are very concrete. And you've seen the research, and which is why I've put really extracts from the reports, because you've seen that it's big numbers, charts, simplified trends, and sometimes we try not to simplify too much the ideas. But in order to reach some of the conclusions, we need also the ideas beyond, and we need the concepts. And when we speak about, because with all of that, it is not only about market trends and market shares and about just some industry metrics. We spoke about the missions, we spoke about the values, we spoke about the difficult to reach audiences, we spoke about briefly, not too much for the MIS, but artificial intelligence, etc. All of these themes and topics requires really a conceptual approach, and to be understood before being manipulated. Nowadays also, I didn't speak, but we're also thinking about and looking at what happens with the metaverse, for instance. So of course, but before having a narrative in an MIS report being a bit market-based and simplified, we also need the ideas and the concepts and what it means really for the viewers, the listeners, for the citizens, what it means in terms of strategy. So the theoretical approach is useful for us. The issue I see being at the MIS is that even for us, we are extremely busy and under pressure, as you are, of course, all of us, and the members even more. So the role of the MIS would really be to digest and summarize and present, I don't know, the academic research and the theoretical frameworks in an easy to digest way, which it's always a bit a challenge. But if you see what I mean, Nina.
Absolutely, and I see also a role for our association doing some of that, and I think Marta Rodriguez has done an amazing job already in the first newsletter, and we hope to continue that. And just as a side note, Florence mentioned the fellowship at the EBU, and personally I have found the work of people who have been fellows then in really enriching the academic community. I think Dominique Speck for the last time and won a prize, the RIPE conference paper prize, very interesting work. So thank you for providing us that opportunity. That's a great way of collaboration as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very nice collaboration. And I cannot stress more the fact that indeed Dominique Speck during the latest RIPE conference received the EBU prize, but that was not the EBU was not part of the jury at all, not at all. That was really a very good, we sponsored the prize, but I wasn't part of the jury. It was a very good surprise. He's a very good and talented researcher, and we're really pleased to have him with us. And he was there with us during the COVID year. So it was a challenging year, but he did super well. And he really enhanced, that was the type of collaboration. He enhanced some of the reports that we had, which were yearly reports, mostly fact-based. And he had really improved these reports by bringing an academic and the theoretical framework and putting the numbers into perspective and really digging further and improving the quality of the research. So I cannot say more. So this is absolutely needed.
Great. So if this position is vacant, you will find it in the newsletter, I guess?
Yes, it will be advertised in the newsletter.
Okay, so we can all keep an eye. Okay, so we're 2 minutes over. I would like to thank Florence very, very much for being here, for her time. It was very useful. Thank you. And I would also like to thank Marta and Mina. And of course, all of you for being here. And I'm sure that this is the start of the conversation.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, the conversation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Mina. Thanks, everybody.